Well, if you're new with us, I hope you're going to have a little bit of fun today because you're going to go, I've never heard that story in church today. And so I'm looking forward to where we're going to go. So let me kind of paint the picture for you. It's November 10th, 2012. College football history changes forever. The number 15 Texas A&M Aggies roll into the hallowed ground of Tuscaloosa to take on the number 1 undefeated Big Bad Alabama. And a name that had been growing some attention would be center stage that night. You see, Texas Aggies, while they had 2 losses, and they're going to one of the most revered places in all of college football, they're being led by redshirt freshman quarterback Johnny Manziel. And Johnny and his team beat Alabama that night, 29-24. They make history. And not only that, but he goes on to make bigger history, where he turns out to be the first freshman ever to win the Heisman Trophy. He gets drafted in the first round by Cleveland Browns in 2014. If there's ever a person that was destined for greatness, there's ever a person that just had that thing, you know, that thing that like you see it and you don't know how to explain it, but you know what it is, it's called potential. And he had it. He could throw on you without thinking. He could run when you're blinking in an eye and he's gone. His PR team worked 24/7. This guy had it all. He was getting social media shout-outs from LeBron James. He was hanging out with the who's who in Miami, New York, LA. He was it. He was going to be the next greatest thing. But here's the interesting and finicky thing about potential. It only goes one of 2 ways. Very rarely both. One of 2. One, you get the position, and meaning you did it. You endured, meaning that you worked really hard and you had the ethic, and man, you proved the haters wrong and you supported those who affirmed you all the way. You did it. Great job. You tell the story of greatness. And if we're in this series we're in right now called Sing, Swim, by the way, how cute was a little kid in that video, right? Right? In case you're new to our church, that's my son, so I can do that. But if you are in this series and we're talking sink or swim, go into your position, that would be swimming. You made it. The waves hit and the current was hard, but you persevered and you made it. But potential also has another side that's just as powerful. You just don't know it till it's a little too late. And it's pride. Pride is when you think it's about you more than anything else. Pride is when you read your own headlines. Pride is when you want all the credit and the glory, and without it, you feel less. That's what pride does. And potential has the power to go to either one. In fact, the idea of pride, it's a tale common as man. Been around all of history. In the Old Testament of the Bible, one of the wisest men to ever walk the earth, people still talk about that. Historians talk about how wise this man is. He's the 3rd king of Israel. His name's King Solomon. This is what he has to say about pride. I hope you don't miss this. He says, first pride, then the crash. The bigger the ego, the harder the fall. What he's saying is, where there's pride, there will be a fall. Where pride enters into your story, you're going to stumble. It's just a fact. And this has been around, this has been true for humanity since the dawn of time. And if you know the story of Johnny Manziel, then you know where he ended up. His pride got to him. He had a hard time telling the truth. He lacked accountability. He didn't take a lot of things serious. He didn't take his responsibility serious. He got into gambling. He had addictions. And who was once deemed for greatness had fallen like many others before because of reading their own headlines and believing they were greater than they really were. And while I want to tell you another story today about someone else who had unbelievable potential, I want to start with kind of 2 questions. And depending on your stage of life, depending on where you find yourself right now, one of these may resonate with you more than the other. But I still want to ask you, and I want you to truly think about it. The first question I want to ask you, depending on your stage of life, is where has your potential taken you? You look around at your relationships, you look around at your successes and your failures, you look around at what you've done, what you've accomplished, where you are right now in life. Where has your potential taken you? Also, depending on your stage of life, maybe this one resonates with you a little bit differently, is where is your potential headed? When you take an inventory of what you're building, how you're building it, and who you're building it with, where are you headed? Is there any inclination of what kind of story you're going to tell? And I want you to wrestle with these two questions. I want you to think, I want you to find a quiet place. I want you to truly just say, man, I need to think about that. But here's this weird thing about the human condition. I don't know if you are familiar with it. I don't know if you're aware of it. As soon as I say it, you're going to go, oh, yeah, that's true. But this fascinates me. So be ready. As you go think about this question, don't forget this aspect of your humanity. We have the power to lie to ourselves. Has anyone else found that fascinating? You know something is untrue, but you'll believe it to be true. You'll know something is true, and you'll believe it to be untrue. You're like, I really want to eat and drink this thing that's full of red 40. It's good for me. You know what it's going to do to your brain. This is part of the human condition. So I'm going to ask you again, where is your potential taking you? Or where is your potential headed? And while you sit and you think and you process, hopefully disconnected, maybe it's just you and God or just you and it's an alone time, if there's any chance that you could lie to yourself, I want you to ask this to somebody you trust. Not someone that'll tell you what you want to hear, but someone you trust. And now I want to get into our story of someone else who had unbelievable potential. And we're going to do that. We're going to go back to the Old Testament in the Bible. And here's the thing. If you're not a Jesus follower, you're not a church person, or you wrestle with the Bible, my hope is that you might really enjoy this story today, because you're going to go, oh, everyone's not perfect. Nope. This is a great story of someone who's not perfect at all. And someone that you can say, oh, all religious people think they got it all together. We don't. We're messed up. We have issues. We're going to read a story about where we see that being true. But let me give you a little context so you understand what we kind of have to get to today. Israel, at this time in history, it's about 1,000 years before Jesus walked the earth. Okay, what we're about to read, it has been around a long time. And Israel, until this point, has been led by God himself. That's what made them so different than any other nation. Every nation had some type of ruler, whether it was a king or it was Pharaoh. They had some type of ultimate ruler. And Israel's ultimate ruler was God himself. Now, in today's world, I get it. It can be a little uncomfortable or a little weird, make you scratch your head when someone says like, hey, God, talk to me, or I heard from God. It's like, oh, sure you did, buddy. I get that. I get if that makes you uncomfortable. But for roughly about 400 to 500 years within history, it's true with Israel. And then God kind of had a twofold plan of what he would do. He would speak to a religious leader called a prophet, and the prophet really would speak on behalf of God. And then when it came to rule and order and law, you had what was called judges. And there was multiple judges throughout Israel. There was no king. Israel was led by God themselves. But Israel started looking around the nations around them. They started saying, well, maybe this is what's impeding us. Maybe this isn't why we're successful or why we're taken seriously. And so it got to the point where Israel wanted a king. And they were telling, I don't know how this would go, but it's like, hey, God, that whole like leading us thing you're doing, it's not really working out well. Can you send us an infallible human? That would be great. Can you send us someone who's going to mess up? Can you send someone who is not perfect? Can you send someone who's probably going to take advantage of us, someone who's going to lie, someone's going to tax us? Can you do that? That'd be great. At one point, there's the prophet. We're going to see his name. His name is Samuel. He's a part of this story. At one point, Samuel is mad because he feels like the people of Israel have kind of turned against him. And God's like, no. He didn't turn against you. He turned against me. And so with a lot of warning, God gives Israel their first king, and his name was King Saul. And he comes on the pages of history. He comes on the pages of Israel history a lot like Johnny. Ridiculous potential. A lot of success in the beginning, a lot of humility, kind of that idea, where did this guy come from? And I love the story we're going to get to kind of unpack together about King Saul. So let's look at this together really quick. You're going to read a bunch of stuff here, and this is what I love about the Bible. I want to say a bunch of Jewish names. This is what I love about the Bible. Real people, real places, real events in history. So much of history has actually been validated by the Bible. There are historians who are like, hey, I don't know if I believe in Jesus, but the Bible really helps us understand history, because this is all real, documented stuff. And for us as Americans, if we were reading this, there'd be a few names on here that we'd be like, oh, okay, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. You're just kind of letting us know where he came from. So that the writer's writing to a Jewish audience to kind of let them understand who this man is. There was a Benjamite, a man of standing, whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, the son of Zerar, the son of Becharath, the son of Aphiah of Benjamin. Kish had a son named Saul, as handsome a young man as could be found anywhere in Israel, and he was a head taller than anyone else. So they kind of state like who this man is, what families he's coming from, kind of, let's validate why this is the king. But then the writer goes into, he looks like a king. He's young, and he's handsome, and he's taller than anyone else. He's kind of the guy you look at and you're like, yeah, that guy would be a leader. That guy would be kind of probably worth following. Like, he just looks the part. He's got that going for him. And I love how the writer kind of brings us into understanding there's so much more than like just a coronation. Let's talk about who this guy is. Now, here's something fascinating about Saul and his story, if you keep reading in chapter 9, that I think it's so interesting, is that there's no better way to put it. Saul is out looking, before he's king, he's out looking for his father's donkeys. Okay, this is why I love the Bible, right? You can't just make that up. Like, there's no necessarily religious tone in that. He's looking for a bunch of donkeys. And he's so emphatic about it. He knows this has to do with their well-being and their livelihood, and so he is passionately pursuing, hey, I got to find my dad's lost donkeys. And he is, and it shows his work ethic. It shows his character. It shows that he truly cares about something. And what I love about Saul, it's so subtle you could miss it, is that it dawns on him, he's like, hey, I'm near Samuel's house. And doesn't Samuel talk to God? Well, let's see what the God guy has to say about my donkeys. Maybe God cares about my donkeys. And here's what I love. Don't miss this about King Saul. King Saul believed that God just wasn't some big thing up in the sky, but that God cared about the everyday details of life. Saul had faith that God cared about his donkeys. This shows what kind of man he starts out to be. In case you didn't know, God does care. To all you moms who are exhausted, the schedule and the diapers and the constant needing you, God cares. Fathers you're working hard. Maybe you feel like you're not making ends meet. You're struggling with this idea of provision and quality time with the family. God cares. God cares about the littlest details of your everyday life. He is a close God. And Saul understood that. And so as Saul is heading up to Samuel's house, God has a moment with Samuel to kind of prepare him for this idea of a king. Check this out. Now, the day before Saul came, the Lord had revealed this to Samuel. About this time tomorrow, I'll send you a man from the land of Benjamin. Anoint him ruler over my people Israel. He will deliver them from the hand of the Philistines. I have looked on my people, for their cry has reached me. When Samuel caught sight of Saul, the Lord said to him, this is the man I spoke to you about him governing my people. Now, why is this so important? What I love here is this idea is that their cry has reached me. What cry? For a king. God's saying, I've heard you. I've heard the people, and I'm going to answer it. I'm going to give them what they need, and that is the man. That's the man that's going to do it. Let me ask you an honest question. Online, you can participate as well. You ever had someone in your life that thinks they're God's gift to humanity? Yeah, you're thinking about them right now. Or you nudged them. Yep, someone just got nudged in church. You did something online. I know it. We all know that person or those persons, right? Guess what? Saul could actually say that. He could be like, hey, I blame God. I'm the king. God made me. God spoke and made me king. If there's anyone that could ever own that title of God's gift, he'd be like, thank you. And there's early success in him. He's got the looks. He believes faith in God is important. He's young, he's strong. He's a trusted Jewish person. But you and I know something that I'm beginning to wonder if Saul didn't know. You see, position and potential can ultimately still end in pride. Your potential and your position can both still end in pride. No promotion, no job status, no title, no moving up, no income level is going to change what's going on in your heart. You might keep trying to cover it up or combat it or fight it, but what's going on in your heart will always come out. What is clamoring inside of you will pour out of you. Jesus actually says this in the New Testament, in the Gospel of Luke. This is what he tells us. He says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So whatever it is that you're propping up center stage, whatever it is that you're kind of set, hey, this is it. This is what's on the pedestal. If it's the me show, it's going to come out. Whatever it is that you have put set front and center of your life will ultimately come out in your story. And what we learn about Saul is why he starts so strong. He starts making these decisions where his true character comes out and what's going on in his heart really comes out. And one Bible commentator, one historian actually says it like this. It's so simple. He says, the more popular he got, the more out of control his actions seemed to be. This is a story about what's going on inside of a person, regardless of what's going on the outside. This is a story about what's going on here and that what can happen and what can hang in the balance. So Saul has success, but he starts making these little decisions, and little decisions add up. It's fascinating when you learn this in nautical terms. A ship can only get 1 degree off and be miles off course. Same is true in life. Little decisions, you're headed this way, little decisions will take you here. And the next thing you know, you're so far, you're like, how did I get here? All the way back here. Let me tell you what happens with Saul. When we get to chapter 15, they're going to war. Israel has to go to war. And God's kind of given some very clear commands and clear guidelines for how he wants this to go and how he wants Saul to act, because he understands pride. He understands the human condition. And Saul gets into battle. They have victory, and he doesn't listen to what God commanded. He basically does the exact opposite. And he starts kind of taking things as trophies and as spoil, and he's kind of like, look at me, look at the Saul show, look at what I did. He's so enamored with his own glory, he wants to leave that place to go to another city down the road to create a statue for himself because of the victory he had. And because he consistently lost his way, because he is making these decisions, God has a moment where he tells Samuel, again, a prophet, what's going to happen with Saul. And this is what he says. When the word of the Lord came to Samuel, I regret that I have made Saul king, because he's turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions. Samuel was angry, and he cried out to the Lord all that night. How would you feel hearing that God used the word regret? And here's the thing. There's some of you today, there's some of you watching online, that you think that's you. You read that, and it sounds like God made a mistake. God does not make mistakes. You are not a mistake. That's not what he's saying. Hebrew and English can be very hard to go together sometimes, and what the word is I am grieved. I have pain. I have hurt. Who Saul had become has broken the heart of God. God didn't make a mistake. It's just Saul's actions led to pain. And there's a moment where Samuel and Saul are kind of discussing all of this and kind of what's going to unfold for the kingdom under Saul. And when Samuel goes to turn away and to leave Saul, this is what happens. As Samuel turned to leave, Saul caught a hold of the hem of his robe, and it tore. Samuel said to him, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today and has given it to one of your neighbors, to one better than you. He who is the glory of Israel does not lie or change his mind, for he is not a human being that he should change his mind. If you were with us last week, Pastor Unique did an unbelievable job on one of my absolute favorite stories in the entire Bible, of the Old Testament especially. It's where David is hiding in a cave and King Saul is pursuing him. So who becomes king after Saul is David. David's the second king. And if you know anything about the story, if you didn't listen, I beg you to go listen to this. I really do. I'm not trying to pump like Quest Analytics or anything on social media. I just want you to listen to a message. I think it's really good. But it's in that story, there's another part of the corner of a robe being cut. And I have no doubt that Saul in that moment is like, oh. I have no doubt he flashed back at this point. And when he says to one of your neighbors, it's David. David is going to be king. Because when you turn the page in the Bible right here, when you go to 1 Samuel 16, it's all about Samuel heading out to the house of Jesse to anoint King David. And actually, we find out that Samuel never talks to Saul again. He leaves him in this moment, and that's it. Healthy boundaries, right? And he goes and he anoints David king. In my preparation for this message, I've been preparing this message for about 3.5 weeks, and if I can be vulnerable and be honest with you, I've asked myself, am I Saul? God, I don't want to be, but am I Saul? I literally looked at my wife and I was like, babe, I'm wrestling with this message because I'm wondering if I'm Saul. And she looked at me clear as day and she goes, you're an idiot sometimes, but you're not Saul. But I think there's the potential of it in all of us. There's the potential to make it the me show and to clamor and to make it about position and title and prestige, whatever all that stuff really means. And we get lost in it. It should cause us to pause. And let me just say, whether it's Johnny Manziel, whether it's King Saul, whether it's someone in your life, whether it's you, I just want to give you a truth today, a truth that's been haunting me for a few weeks. And it's this: pride destroys people. When I was originally writing this message a few weeks ago, I wanted to put a blank here, like pride destroys, and you fill in your own blank. And I really felt like the Lord was like, no. Yes, it can destroy a bank account or a career, but pride always destroys people. And it's not just the people who made the choice, it's the people who are affected by it. Pride will destroy a family. Pride will destroy a marriage. Pride will destroy an organization. Pride will destroy the parent-child relationship. Pride will destroy an inner circle of friends. Pride has the power to seep into a generation of people and make its way through multiple people because of a moment and choices of pride. It's not your bank account or your title. It is people that get destroyed by pride. And while I was thinking through this message and while I was prepping for this message, I was really thinking the idea of, I want to end it here. It's accountable. Could be convicting. It's just truth that maybe we need to hear today. This is where I wanted to end the message originally. But in sitting with it for a while, I really felt like God himself, there's that phrase again, like I felt like the Lord spoke to me. I know that can sound a little weird. You just kind of feel it in your heart. Of saying, you know what? There are people that are coming to Quest today. There are people in this room, but there's people online that came here looking for hope. And you need hope today. Maybe you've never given church a chance. Or maybe you did give church a chance and it hurt you. Church hurt is a real thing. Or maybe you find yourself sitting right now in the weight of all the decisions you've made and you're kind of living out the consequences and life does feel like a mess. And you're here and you're looking for hope. You're watching, looking for hope. There is hope against pride. It does not have to be your story. It does not have to be our story. And there is hope that we can cling to. Now, while I would ultimately stand here and tell you, I believe that hope does rest in the person of Jesus Christ himself. Absolutely, I believe that. I believe it since I was 12 years old when I turned my life over to him. I believe it's not just him, it's the mindset of him in our daily lives. It's how we combat the pride show. Now, I remember being in college 20 years ago. I'm showing my age. And I remember reading what I'm about to read for probably the 200th time, and it just smacked me in the face. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it now. If you don't read the Bible, you'll be fascinated to know that people who do, they will read the same thing over and over and over, and then literally 14 years later, they're like, oh, that's what that means. It's crazy how it happens. And if you're a Christian, you chuckled because you know it's happened. And I remember being in college, and I read this, and it became my prayer. It became my standard. It became the way that I wanted to combat pride. And to understand it, it comes from Jesus' half-cousin. His name was John the Baptist. And John had a ministry before Jesus was physically walking around in ministry. And his whole point of his ministry was to call people to repentance, but he was pointing people to Jesus. He was like, the Messiah is coming, be ready. So his whole ministry was to point people to Jesus. And there comes a point where Jesus' ministry is taken off and it's growing, and John's ministry is dwindling. Why? Because he's pointing people to Jesus. It's supposed to dwindle. But his followers are upset, and they're like, well, why are they growing, and why are they getting all the attention? And in John, in all of his wisdom, in all of his calling, in all of his purpose, he says something that 20-year-old Justin was wrecked by. And I hope you can hold on to it today as your hope as you combat pride. And it's this, it's a simple thing you can say and pray. It's this: he must become greater, and I must become less. That's the exact prayer I prayed before I walked on this stage this morning. You become greater, I become less. Not the me show, but your show. I want to attach my name. I want to prop up the greatest name in history. I want to attach my name to that. Can I be honest with you? I won't even make it about you. I'll make it about me. I've probably got 80 or 90 years on this earth. Probably less if I keep eating bacon and chicken wings. I only get 80 or 90. And my name will be forgotten. Do you know the name of your great-great-great-great-grandfather? There's probably like one of you right now who would say yes and derail the sermon, so don't. Do you know the name of your great-great-great-grandmother? They had a life. They had a marriage. They had kids. They had grief. They had loss, health issues, money issues, or they had unspeakable joy, and they had major celebrations in their life. And we don't know them. We have no idea who they are or what they did. He must become greater. I must become less. I don't want to make it the Justin show because my name is going to be forgotten. You want to combat pride? Attach your name and your story to the one greater than you. Make your life about propping up his name. See, this is what David understood. There was that thing about King David. He wasn't perfect. Trust me, we could do a whole series just on David and the mistakes he made. He wasn't perfect, but he's called a man after God's own heart for a reason. Because he had that thing when you come across somebody and you're like, I know they're not perfect, but man, I trust them. I could be led by that person. I could do life with that person. I just trust them. You're not oblivious to their imperfections, but that's what David had. For David, it wasn't the David show, it was the God of Israel. Saul didn't understand that. Saul lost his way completely in that. And I'm telling you, 20-year-old college student Justin, heart became broken over this. And this has been my prayer. I remember clamoring to become a father because we can't have kids naturally. If you know my story with me and my wife, we fostered and we adopted. I remember wanting the Justin show, wanting the Justin legacy to live on as a man. I remember praying, you become greater, I become less. How do you want me to have children? What children do you have for me? That's what I want to surrender to. And I've got two beautiful ones because that's who God trusted me with. You have potential? Great. What are you doing with it? You have the position, you got the title, you made it. Well, how are you stewarding it? How are you faithfully cultivating what you've been entrusted with? Because it's not just about you and me. And if you don't hear anything else, if you're wrestling with church and the Bible and all that stuff, that's fine. Thank you for trusting us today. But maybe you can just hold on to this simple truth today, is that who is greater than what? Who you are becoming is more important than your title. Who your life points to matters more than what it is you're doing. Now, don't get me wrong. What you do is important. I get that. The decisions you have to make and the responsibility. I'm not saying it's not important. But what I'm saying is ultimately important is who your life points to. Are you attaching your name and propping up the name to the greatest one in history? How do you combat pride? You know that who is greater than what? He becomes greater, and I become less. Saul had a sink story. We don't have to. We can learn when our egos and our prides get too big, and we can move forward knowing it's not all about us. If you'd allow me, I'd love to pray for you. Father, I just thank you for this truth. It's kind of hard to hear, but at the same time, it's true, and it's something that we've got to cling to today, is that you become greater and I become less. God, pride has a ripple. Pride brings pain and hurt. Maybe some of us are the product of that. And so I pray right now for hope. The hope that is you. The hope that is our lives, making our lives about you and your story. Us attaching ourselves to your story rather than our own. We thank you, God, that you love us. That you want to have a relationship with us. You will rescue us and not leave us stuck in some of the things we've built over these years. So we trust you. We need you. In Jesus' name, amen. So one of the things we like to do at Quest, not to force it, not to manipulate it in any way, but we just know that God can move, and God can speak, and God can reveal. And so we like to offer what we call a response time. And again, that's just for you and God. We're not trying to manufacture anything at all. And so what I want to do today, if you're a Jesus follower or you're not, you're welcome to partake. If you're like, okay, I'm going to take a step on this faith thing and I'm going to do this. Here's what I'd love to invite you to do with me. I would love for you to take your hands and put your palms up. You can just put it in your lap. You don't have to awkwardly hold over your head or anything. If you're at home, I want you to do this wherever you're sitting. If you're sitting in Starbucks, just get ready, okay? People might look at you. Just put your hands out, palms up. And we're going to get a little uncomfortable today, church people. I want you to say out loud after what I say. Jesus, you become greater, and I become less. Jesus, you become greater, and I become less. Not my story, but yours. Not my name, but yours. Pride will not take me down, because you will be lifted high.